Now let's move forward and explore the exciting role of robotics in pushing the frontiers of innovation in automotive manufacturing. To initiate a panel discussion on the topic, Flexible Manufacturing in Automotive by Autonomous Mobile and Collaborative Robots, please join me in welcoming the session's moderator, Mitchell Kos, who is an associate manager at Tesla Motors, with a round of applause.
So thanks again for having me and these fine fellows up here. We are here to talk about, originally we were here to talk about robotics, and I think I decided I would change the topic a little bit for you guys in typical Tesla fashion. We don't do the way things should be done. But instead of talking to you guys for 50 minutes about why robotics is great for manufacturing, I think given the demographic of people we have here, I thought it would be more interesting and engaging for the audience and for the panelists to talk a little bit more about the capabilities that both automation and technology help tier 1s through 4s and third parties, as well as OEMs, in enabling to solve problems in their business, whether that's manpower, material, machine, or method. And so we'll kind of explore that. I've got a pretty crazily deep panel here with me, and I appreciate that some of them came very last minute, so I'll thank them in advance. But I am joined here by Tyler Bray. He is the CEO of TK Trailer Parts. I'm also here with Divine Maffa, who is the CEO of Hendy Motor International, and Tom Oser, who is the CEO of Pipeline Strategies, and Rob Thompson, who is a senior engineer at Zero Electric Vehicles. So if you guys wouldn't mind, please give them a round of applause for joining us up here. So to kind of set the tone for you guys in the audience and on the panel, instead of talking to you guys about, again, flexible manufacturing and why robots are great and all that great stuff, I wanted everybody in the audience and the panelists to think of a problem in either your business, your employer, or someone you've worked with that's had a problem in something they do, whether it's a software issue, a customer service issue, a technical problem, a process problem, a ramp problem, a scaling problem, whatever it might be. And I want you to think about that for our panel and start to think about, is there other ways that we can do this differently, whether it's through technology, in some capacity to help streamline our process. And that's what I kind of want to start with you guys. And if you guys wouldn't mind introducing each of yourselves, what you guys do in a little bit more detail. And my first question to all of you when you answer this is, how autonomous is your business? Why don't we start with you, Divine?
How are you?
I think you're good.
How are you, everybody? My name is Divine from Zimbabwe, of course. I'm the CEO of Hendy Motor, founded it in about 2 years ago. I was in Memphis, where I actually live, and I saw all these scooters running around, and I said, you know, Africa is so behind at the moment, and we want to improve life by automating everyone. And so then went into vehicle manufacturing by partnering up with a Pakistani company that produced three-wheelers. And so we started to import that technology into Zimbabwe, where we were assembling these vehicles. But then it also transitioned into my love for art and redesigning and getting into the space of automation and self-driving vehicles. And we finally came up with one of the most exciting vehicles called the Hendy Beluga, which has been actually recently been in talks to get acquired by MaxD Corporation. I think you guys should check it out, MAXD. Very good company that likes to acquire new technologies. One of the things we found is that most companies and most supercars are made out and they die in the shows and they never make it to the market. And so we started to say, okay, well, let's put the best minds of Africa and then put this technology behind us and all these patents, and find a way to bring these things to market and collaborate with anyone in the world internationally. So that's how MaxD comes into play, trying to put some of these ideas into the market. And so how does it tie into automation? In Africa, we usually made things with hands and everything breaks down. We have to tie things, we have to open it up. Very few robotics are in play. And it is our desire, obviously, now that we're here, and thanks to the new innovations that are coming into play, we want to establish and make work easier and allow humans to have their ability to perform at their highest maximum potential by assisting their work abilities, and as well making sure that we prevent repetitive injuries. We automate difficult areas that are very hard to usually do with hands or an individual just working individually as compared to having to apply robotics in it. So yeah, that's my small introduction for now.
Tom?
Hi, Tom Oser, Pipeline Strategies. What I do is I work with companies to consider how to maximize the valuation of their company in the event that they want to sell it or get invested in by a private equity firm. And the level of best practices, either in operations or information technology or the financial foundations of the company, how well they implement best practices will go toward the multiple that an investor might be willing to pay for the company, whether that's a multiple of revenue or a multiple of EBITDA or whatever. But thinking about, as a consulting company, we're completely autonomous. Try to corral a bunch of consultants into one place in a particular manner. I can tell you they're autonomous. But let me go to a client that, in an industry that I actually worked for the example that you give. And my observation is that so much of manufacturing across this country is long-lived manufacturing. Some of it very, very simple. It's not rocket science. And I think to the extrusion of plastic pipe. Plastic pipe is a 100-year-old industry and better. Extruding pipe on a continuous basis, set it and forget it, until, of course, something goes wrong. And even today, I have a client, and we're working on, finally, after decades, of the one thing that you have to do when you're extruding plastic pipe is that it's the resin is soft when it's superheated, and then you've got to keep the pipe in its round form until it cools down. And then you place it through a vacuum chamber. So you put it into the vacuum chamber so that the pressure, the outward pressure, keeps the pipe round until it cools down. Well, if that vacuum chamber loses its vacuum, the chances are the pipe goes out of round and you lose the wall thickness and you've got a quality issue. Well, the cost of pipe that gets returned perhaps weeks later or months later because the pipe isn't fitting into the fittings out in the field, that cost is disconnected with the operational metrics of the manager in the plant. And so they forget about that. And so they resist automating the measurement of that pressure to get real-time measurements to find out the point of failure to stop it now, because the cost of automating that line even further eats into the overall operational efficiency of that line and the cost associated with the metrics that manager is managing toward.
It's a great example.
And so by now using cheaper Internet of Things to get around to manufacturing floors, usually inferior information technology network, now you can have wireless in, grab the data in real time, and when that line goes out of line, if you can fix it, you can stop a lot of quality problems. So that's one example of the resistance of old manufacturing, because it's so simple. How tough could it be? Really and truly, the technologies that we have can really make old manufacturing lines much more sophisticated. So I'll stop there.
That's a great example. That's a really great example. I think Rob's going to touch on something too about how we're looking for a paradigm shift, right, in the industry. And obviously, I might be a fish out of water here, being one of the only OEMs here. But for anybody here, whether you're at the dealership level, tier level, contractor level, third party, there is a need for us to quicken the pace of the industry. And part of that is because a lot of focus is on how do I get involved with an OEM? I need the OEM support to do X, Y, or Z. But I definitely think from exactly from your example, there are other industries and other businesses out there that can benefit from looking where the problems do lie. And it's not always at the customer level or the consumer level, and it's not always at the OEM level. It can be just as something as simple as an operational issue that's not driven to a metric in a plant. And these are all very valuable tools that help us all here do our business better and faster. So that's a good example. Rob?
Hey guys, thank you for having me. Rob Thompson, Senior Systems Engineer at Zero Electric Vehicle. I have hands-on experience with production lines and the advancements of new technologies into the production lines. That's what I feel like we were talking about, this paradigm shift. I feel like we have to have a shift in the industry to where we put more effort into automation strictly to keep up with the advances in the technology themselves of the products that we are building. So the EV industry is so new, there are processes in which we can take from older industries or what the industry's been doing for the past 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and we can use that, but there's also processes that have not been defined yet and things that we need to change in the way we do these processes in order to keep up the pace. People want things now. They want development now. Investors want to know when they're going to get their ROI. They're investing in the company. With automation, that date or deadline can be solidified. You know that it takes your line X amount of time to produce X amount of units. So that's definable. When I've worked on lines where everything is done by hand, the human factor is there, which can increase or decrease production times, which doesn't give you a definable answer for whoever's funding you. So it doesn't also just end at the manufacturing line. The processes in which we design things as engineers, those need to be automated as well. You spoke about how getting all these consultants together. It's the same thing with engineers. The effectivity of something that I do, let's say in the powertrain or let's say the battery manufacturing, will also affect the chassis at some point. And if you don't have a grasp on what's going on or you don't have a system set up to kick you back, maybe a new design that you put out there, if you don't have those processes set up, it's detrimental to the production line in the long run, getting your new prototype or your concept to market. So automation, I feel, is the ultimate goal for any startup to get into the industry as fast as possible right now. So, thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Tyler Bray, and I'm the CEO of TK Trailer Parts. So my business is more in the realm of the transportation side, the trailers that you would pull around or behind your dually trucks or the semi 18-wheeler tractor trailers and whatnot. So I just want to raise the attention to, in comparison, if you really think about how much more automation that we've had in the automotive side compared to the trailer side, there's this very, very big gap. In my business, you still have end consumers building their own small trailers. There are a lot of mom and pop shops that are opening up, manufacturing these 7-car haulers, car haulers in general, even the smaller ones up to the bigger ones. So the question is, looking at the difference between how automotive manufacturers take care of their manufacturing systems and how automated that is, how can we implement that over to the manufacturing side of the trailers or more the transportation side? Because me looking from my industry, I see that you guys are way ahead of us as far as how much automation there is involved in the manufacturing design processes and whatnot, and even the regulations involved in that. And so it'd be very interesting to go into conversation to see how we can implement that to the trailer side so that the end consumer can benefit from the higher qualities, the higher efficiencies, and things of that nature. As far as from the parts side, the manufacturing of the parts also is not as automated. We may use an automated CNC machine, but at the end of the day, the amount of automation and technology that exists in the automotive world is just ages ahead of the trailer manufacturing world. And so I think that's really important for us to think about as well, because when you think about automotive and transportation, yes, your vehicles, you have your big brand names, but then when you go down to the trailers, I would like to venture to say that maybe some of y'all know 1, 2, maybe 0 trailer manufacturers. It's always, I want a trailer, I want a, whatever the utility of the trailer it is that I need. I don't want a specific brand, because there's hundreds of different unregulated brands out there with systems with no automation. I ventured out there myself. I opened an entity called TK Trailers to see what manufacturing looks like. And we ended up pumping out maybe 10 trailers a week. And it's as easy as just, if you know how to fabricate material, put together some parts, on the under chassis. You have a trailer, and then you register it at the title office. It isn't difficult. Not as difficult as if I wanted to build, my own vehicle. I couldn't do that, right? But I can hire a few people who know how to fabricate, and we could do that with the trailer side. And so I really think it's important for us to take a look at the transportation side as well and see, okay, what automotive practices can we implement technology-wise into the trailer industry? And I think that the trailer industry, or more the transportation side, can learn a lot from automotive manufacturing.
It's also a good example too. Hopefully everybody's kind of seen where we're going with this, and maybe you've thought of a problem, in your current employer or your business currently. And this is kind of a question for you guys building off that. A lot of the issues that we see at the OEM level is how close are we to this technology, right? And Divine hit on it right on the head, is that, coming from different parts of the world, some of this technology just doesn't exist. My question to you guys on the panel is, how critical do you guys see where you are geographically located to help you guys adopt these systems, or maybe it inhibits your ability to adopt these? What are your guys' thoughts on that? Divine, we'll start with you, because you're an African expert.
Yeah. So in my realm in Africa, what we are doing at Hendemoto is the ability to manufacture different parts of our products by contracting various individuals, and then we bring them together at our key assembly point, and then we put them together. That has been the model that we have been using. Of course, now we have transitioned to a better model where the CEO of MaxD says, hey, I like your design, the Hende Beluga, which is the shape of a whale that I designed, and of course it's a social animal, and now we are producing that here in the United States, and we are acquiring various technologies that we are going to implement in producing this vehicle. But in the manufacturing process of it, we are obviously going to use the same process of contracting different parts of various items that we then bring together. And in the assembly process, what technologies are we going to use? Obviously, I'm sure we're going to use predictive robots that will allow us to put things together. And mostly, it's going to be a lot of hard work, which is very, very American. And most people always say, well, are robots going to take over the world? Are we going to give up our freedom? I think we did talk about it a little bit. And it's a scary situation and a thought process, obviously. And I think that it depends. We have to balance the scale and see what works for us and make sure that people are productive, but at the same time, they're not making those errors that are more common. I was reading a report last night where it says over 2 million jobs, 20 million jobs will be lost by 2030. I mean, it's not that robots are bad. They're very good. They make us more efficient. Whereas 200,000 cars were made by Renault using robots with no error, versus if they had been constructing them using human beings using their own judgment. So I think we have to apply both robotics and individuals' human power to become efficient. That's my big take.
I think the point you're touching on with regards to balancing of technology and automation with people, I think, is an important part for all of us to take away here. That I don't think that there's a point where we go completely lights out manufacturing. A lot of companies out there attempted that and failed at that aggressively because of the need for people to still maintain those systems or things at the plant. And I think you touch on a really good point that even if you're not, let's say, designing or manufacturing a vehicle of your own, you still need that human talent. And I think that's a definitely point we're going to hit on later, but I think that's a really good point. Tom?
I know the question, but state it again to reset my...
Oh, it was with regards to where geographically businesses are located. How does that help or hinder the adoption of technology into streamlining your business practice?
So I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast about 10 years ago into the LA market, and it was just about the time we're now 20 years, or it was somewhere between 20 and 30 years of the flight of manufacturing to China as a generalization, right? But it was interesting when I went to LA and found out that the history or the legacy manufacturing capabilities in Los Angeles County, because of the aerospace industry, there was oil out there, aerospace and so forth, is that there's the richest mixture of fabrication, manufacturing, job capabilities all over LA, that we had just reached at the start of the 2010s that it was cheaper, in spite of the labor differences, it was cheaper to prototype a product in LA rather than having to fly back and forth to China 2 or 3 times to get the prototype iterations
Especially
done.
with the talent being so close to there.
Yeah, exactly. So you could, now you had all the fabrication parts, and I think about Greg yesterday talking about going through to get his Suburban in all the different shops. Well, Greg's a motivated and intelligent engineer. He knew all the shops to go to.
Yeah.
And I think being in LA, you can fabricate anything that you want, from aerospace quality foundries to hand stitching jobbers. I think the problem is that people forget the tactile, or the in educational terms, it's the ontological learned skills of hands-on doing. And I just want to comment, I'm just like floored with what Tyler's doing with TK Trailers, because in this company where I'm doing the IoT, about a decade ago, I had to buy them a fleet of trucks. And we decided that rather than straight jobs, articulated trailers would be the thing. And we were worried about the trucks, and we didn't give a second thought. I have no idea where the trailers came from. It was that much of a non-issue for me as the executive buying the trailers that I just trusted that a trailer is a trailer is a trailer. And the insight that, and what Tyler is doing is the example of what the US has to do. And that is, he's not an engineer, he's a business guy, and he decided to gather people with the hands-on skill to actually study the economics of this business by actually doing it. And that's what I think about being in the US, is that we've forgotten all the things that we've shipped overseas, and we've got to find a way to get hands-on experience back into the hands of our young engineers and executives to know by doing, because you can't write all these things down.
Yeah, I think that's a very key point, and we'll touch on that too, how we can drive that back to the educational level too. Rob, what are your thoughts?
I'm very lucky being located in Phoenix Metro, Arizona. The new coined term is the Electric Valley. So what we're seeing is a shift from Michigan where the OEs are, shifting down into Arizona, which is where a majority of the hot weather testing is already happening. There's proving grounds throughout Arizona. So having the engineering facilities and manufacturing facilities in Arizona, where we're at, with suppliers there. We've got the largest semiconductor industry right there as well. So all of our power electronics, other companies that we partner with, they're all right there. And I think coming from a smaller startup versus larger OE, we really need to rally together in order to make these strides in the technological advances in the EV world. I don't have enough buy power to buy enough, let's say, battery modules to supply a production plant because I'm fighting with 12 other EV startups right now that are all trying to get those batteries, and there's only enough supply for, let's say, 4 of us at this moment. Because the buy power that we have being small companies. Now, if we were to rally together and we can then change the way we're looking at supply chain, that will also help us in our automation. Like if we can share these technologies together and know that there's enough people in the market for all of us to be doing this, we should be sharing on these technologies and not necessarily hindering other people. We'll go into that a little bit more when we touch on the education aspect.
But you're hitting on a good point in terms of give me some rope here, but you're insinuating a lot that there is a gap, right? That what your end goal might be is directly related to someone else providing you something to be able to gain that capability to actually go ahead and build something. And that's, I would agree, is something that OEs have a great ability to do because they have the CapEx means to go ahead and do that. So I think that's a very good point as well, is that technology is available to us and someone is making something we need, but there is an inherent need to be able to bring those two together so that you can actually go ahead and make the product you want. So it's a good point.
So Mitch, to answer your first question, I believe that geographically speaking in today's age, that mainly affects supply chain, logistics.
For sure.
Right. But I believe where the problem lies is essentially more so the disconnect or the communication between, different companies, different technologies, different industries. My concern is that, let's say 5 years from now, let's say we have EV trucks, transportation-wise. Trailers are still built by metal with primitive technologies that is an afterthought, right? But at the end of the day, you're still dragging, we still have that transportation side. We still have to haul these items, and we still need these trailers. How are we going to bring that technology over to the trailer industry or other industries that may be adjacent that automotive continually is innovating, right? My concern is that right now we're in the age of information and we have so much information at our fingertips, but somebody from Africa, somebody from China might not be able to grasp that information because they don't know there's that technology that exists in the US or wherever it may be. How do we open up that communication and stop the disconnect that's happening across industries, across companies, and help everybody implement that technology to further the automation, to make the products better for not only the automotive manufacturers and the end users, but for the transportation side, for all other sides that are connected. So wrapping back to that, I don't think it's a geographic problem. Yes, supply chain and logistics is an issue there, but I think it's more so, what do we not know, right? Because you can ask me questions about automotive technology, any of y'all right now, and I probably wouldn't be able to make an intelligent conversation because I wouldn't even know what you guys automate on the EV side, MaxD or whatever it is that you guys do with manufacturing in Africa, right? It's just, I believe, that lack of knowledge of what we don't know. So how do we shed light on that so we can delve deeper and share that information with everyone? I think that's the question we have to answer.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. And do you feel that is a resource constraint, or do you feel that we just don't have a defined, what does that actually mean, or do we not have access to that talent to be able to provide you that information?
I believe there's no urgency, right? Like I said, like you said with trailers, right? It was an afterthought. Why do we have to innovate on something that already works and nobody's complaining about, right? Consumers aren't asking the trailer industry to continually innovate and make something new, make something more powerful, make something more awesome, right? But car manufacturers are constantly being pushed to the edge to make something amazing, right? So how is it that we're going to, maybe let the consumer know that the trailer, because at the end of the day, I firmly believe that the consumer is the one that pushes the market. How do we let the consumer know that the transportation side, the trailer side and other adjacent industries are just as important as the vehicle itself? Because if you innovate and innovate and innovate on the automotive side or any side that's leading the charge, and the rest is still primitive, you cannot take advantage of the full capabilities of innovation and technology. Everything around that specific topic needs to be just as technologically advanced.
So it sounds like to be able to manufacture your next generation of trailer-to-trailer parts, you need to know what the customer wants.
Right.
Okay.
And maybe a self-driving trailer.
I have no comment on that. So kind of shifting, and we touched on this with regards to the education. Obviously, we've identified some gaps with what the consumer wants. Maybe that's at the research level or at the ground level, and soliciting that feedback. But we've also touched on access to human capital, and that we in the U.S. and even in Canada, where I'm from originally, manufacturing has historically in the last 10, 15 years been outsourced to overseas, just because it's cheaper, we can get things faster, and it allows us to focus on what we consider more important things, such as IoT or other higher level things that we would consider to be of our nature. And I would agree with Tom's point that I think at least at the Tesla level and at GM where I previously worked at, we need to shift that focus back to humans being our best resource, and especially if we want to bring manufacturing back to North America, especially, and coming out of COVID-19, where we've seen a large disruption in companies and OEs and third parties realizing that we don't have access to the materials that we need to build stuff. And I think that's a big problem as well, and it's an important one that we need to discuss. But from an educational standpoint, access to talent, where do you guys feel that maybe the industry is lacking to be able to not only bring the good ideas forward or what the consumer wants, but also what solutions we have available to that? And I don't want to limit it to just we need more engineers, we need more folks from business school. Where is that talent, and where can we find that, or what do we need to change in our educational system or training to make sure that we can bring in these things into any of your guys' business, any of your businesses to streamline those things?
Well, I guess I can go ahead. What I'm more interested is marketplace innovations, where ordinary people come up with concoctions, ideas that are then shared with bigger companies, or at least assimilated to everybody, and then they function properly. I have a very good example of one of our engineers in Zimbabwe. He came up with the concept of radio frequency energy, which is quite difficult for many people to grasp, because Tesla spoke about it, and you're sort of capturing energy from. And he has demonstrated the use of a vehicle using this energy, and it's perpetual, and it's unheard of, and it's very hard to prove, but he has demonstrated it. So how do you then assimilate it? And then, of course, we have seen cleaning robots in everybody's house these days. We started with iRobot, which in 2000, it was a registered company. It was trading on the stock market, and it's now a formidable company. I mean, shares going up to $200, I think, per share recently. Now we have seen others, after they are patented, expired. You see Roomba and all other many individualized automated robots that are assisting to carry products on top of them and delivering to a workstation and so forth. And so you've seen something that came from the marketplace, ordinary people, and assimilated into a wider market, and then back into the market. And then we see kids now working with all these jigsaw puzzles, coming up with different methods of ingenuity. And so that's the level of training that is already happening now to bridge that gap and continually bring those innovations into the market, is where I find that it is critical and it is important that we aspire to do that. And that's my biggest specialty in terms of identifying those talents and say, hey, we want to bring you to market. And we have a place where we have a home for you. And I think that's where I'm very interested in.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I think about early in my career, I started in the telecommunications industry. And I went to Dallas, and I was working on the switch room floor, and I was the only kid on the switch room floor that went to college. I had an engineering degree, and everyone else had come out of the armed forces from the communications corps because they knew how to make things work, and they knew how to keep a system running at a critical level of, 3, 4, or 5 nines of capability for a telecommunications industry. And I was looked down upon because I was just an educated engineer. I didn't know how to do anything. And that was an amazing education to learn how to do hands-on technician operation work to keep a network running. And then at night, I went up the road to Southern Methodist University to study in the engineering department at night for 2 years to study in the language that I was familiar with, and engineering and book learning and so forth. And it just struck me over the two-year period that was going on, the hands-on in situation and the thought piece in school. So I think what matters is to recognize that. Yesterday we talked about the curve of how technology infuses into a population, and there are different people with different attitudes about how risk averse they are to change in technology and how soon they'll adopt it. Well, I think the same is true for what they're willing to take on about the things that they think about in their careers and so forth. So you're going to have people that are always willing to adapt, always willing to take on the new technology, and those are the ones you have to identify to help you move on the edge. And then think about the people that like more stability, are looking for the 5 nines of getting things through on a quality basis, and allowing them to do that, but keeping an eye on it before technology comes in and obviates their job, start to anticipate that for a longer role where they can transition into new roles where they're maintaining a constancy of keeping the system running for everybody's benefit, so they can get out of the way of technology coming in, because technology will replace any job that's repeatable, continuous, and so forth. If it's clearly defined and the job nature doesn't change, it will be changed. It will be substituted by technology eventually. Yeah. And I think that's what we owe to each other, is to recognize the different types of people in the different types of jobs, and don't leave the ones that are stable and willing to do the hard physical work left to their own devices when we bring the technology to wipe it out. And that's the balance that I think a lot about.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And another thing that we had talked about previously, and we'll hit on later, is the idea and focus of a lot of companies or individuals that we need automation to eliminate jobs. And it's not necessarily always the right form, right? We should be thinking about, can I repurpose this person to serve a larger value add to the company that I work for, my business? And I think that's a really good point, that it requires us to be forward thinking ahead of technology, which is an aggressively hard thing to maintain, but it's something that we need to also drive right from the core, from before you get out of school. And maybe that's vocational training, on-the-job training, wherever it might be, is that we need to consider that we have a large amount of people doing something already, adding value, and maybe they're fantastic at it, but we have opportunity to look and explore and say, maybe this is something we can reallocate, right? We can have something do this for us, and we can have this person add more value by maybe training them to do something more specific or more technical. And that allows us to streamline our business, make more money, right? Because we've now saved money in a wasteful act, and we've now given them and elevated them to another level, which allows us to pay them more, which I think is good for humanity. So that's a good point. Rob, what do you got?
Yeah, there's a couple of points on that, not just on, let's say, the college education here, but continuing education in our industries for everybody, albeit finance, technology, marketing, sales, whatever it is. The technology is moving faster than our education of ourselves. There are few individuals that are the leaders in these industries and or these technologies, but how does the 60-year-old man that's been working on the GM build floor for the past 40 years, how does he deal with the introduction of batteries into a vehicle for EV world? What he's always known is X, but now that changes, and he doesn't understand how does he go about doing diagnostics on a vehicle that he has no idea about. I find that quite frequently with everybody in the new EV industry right now, is there is a lack of education, which if we make that shift, if the company takes advantage of that and they take it into their hands, they know what they're building, continuing education for those employees is what's going to really advance us. And like you said, we don't want to replace people with the machines, right? But let's give the people the education that it takes to absorb that new technology and exploit it. We want speed to market. We want things, more capabilities, faster, cheaper, better, right? And I think if we focus more on the education, you give more value add to the employees that you have, and maybe they're going to be the ones that took their experiences on that line and give the engineers the feedback that they need in order to create a new line that gives us that product that we're looking for. So I think not only does it happen on a formal education level, let's say the university level, but in businesses alone, in whatever industry it is. So I definitely think universities need to step it up as well. Not necessarily being so closed-minded maybe on just one focus, but broadening that as well. Being able to see the reactions, or if you can understand what will happen with whatever process you're doing now, if you can see the effects of that and mitigate those problems or make advances on the line, it's a better value add for every company.
Yeah, and
when
I
they're
think
doing
that ties into some of the conversations that's been brought up and some of the great conversations we've had this week is we have a gap, right, in the millennials where we've got some that are hitting their 40s and are also still learning about these new technologies, and we've got access to a lot of kids coming out of college or trade schools, whatever it might be, or even in the military. At Tulsa, we hired quite a few veterans from the service, and how do we put these two together, right? We've got some that come from schooling or just their own tinkering at home that have a really deep understanding of how to allow your business or any one of your guys' business to accelerate that much faster, but they don't know anything about the business you're in, right? And I think that's an important point that we were all discussing earlier is we have to find a way, and even for you guys in the audience, how do we capture that? It's not a solution we've got right here, but it's something that I think is important, especially with a lot of our companies here trying to adopt technology at such a faster rate because of the need to get to market faster. Right, so I think it's good. Tyler, what do you got on that topic?
This is a very exciting topic for me.
Lay it on us.
I want us to take a step back and just kind of eliminate what we believe confines us to what's conventional. I started my business when I was 14, dropped out of school. I'm 23 now, and just like I opened up my entity for TK Trailers just to see what that's all about, I decided 2 years ago that I would take a look at what higher education is like. So I went to college, and ironically enough, I'm writing a research paper right now about how higher education can and will become obsolete if they don't change. And I think that's important for us to think about, because if that does happen, what are we going to do, right? Are we still looking at those degrees? Are we still, hey, do you have a bachelor's in engineering? Do you have a master's in engineering, right? I believe that the next step for us, because there's just so much access to information nowadays, YouTube, Google, these younger kids, my age, are learning themselves. They're passionate about automobiles. Okay, great. Well, I'm going to spend my life looking at YouTube videos and researching these different articles. How can Tesla, how can these corporations, how can myself provide educational opportunities for these people that supersedes college education or higher education, and teach them ourselves how to innovate, how to produce these technologies, how to utilize these technologies and implement these technologies. And I think if we are able to do that, we can utilize that to also continue and further the education for the people who may be 60, 50, who are not up to date with these educational practices or, new technologies. So I think it's important for us to just also think about not only, hey, how can we innovate in technology, how can we innovate in automation, but how can we innovate in education? Because that's going to further our innovation in automation. So I think that we need to stop thinking, okay, what can the universities do for us, right? And I think the original question was, how can we get better talent in general? And I think how we can get better talent is by developing, cultivating, and creating that better talent ourselves, specializing in what we need to get done. Because if, let's say, Tesla educates a younger person on exactly, hey, this is what we need to innovate on, that person is going to be so much more valuable utilizing 4 years into that topic than 4 years in college learning what everybody else is learning. I think specialization is extremely important, especially when it comes down to automating specific positions. Because if I know how to take this automated robot, make it better, or implement it, I'm so much more valuable than somebody who just knows engineering in general. I think it's all about the application, and I think that us as leaders in our industries need to be able to help make that happen.
Well, that's a good point. And to build off your point, one of the things that we do is we partner with local state colleges, universities, and offer these programs to folks in the community, and we call it START programs, and we essentially take these people on as apprentices, and within 12 to 16 months, they're totally capable of becoming service technicians for Tesla. And it's allowed a large demographic of people that may have not had the ability to go to get higher education or get any trades experience, at least have a grounding where, whether they stay with us or not, we've provided some feed forward to our future, which maybe they go to your guys' company and provide them some in-depth knowledge on how we can service vehicles better, or bring in some level of knowledge at that level. So we don't have a lot of time, but I'll get to your point. But to circle back with kind of the topic we've tried to hit on here is not so much on the robotics side, but automation as a topic and streamlining businesses. What do you guys think in terms of trend that us as leaders here at this conference should take away to our respective businesses as a forward-thinking approach to both humans being our greatest resource and our people really being the core foundations of our business, but also adding technology into that mix that we can help our businesses accelerate to market faster? What are your guys' thoughts? Divine?
Well, I was going to actually pose a question to you when you were talking about the students and
Sure.
the implementation of, your productive values, and then I said, then you asked the question immediately, what is the trend? Because basically I was going to ask you the same thing. What is the trend in Tesla? Are we going to have the entire vehicle produced by a robot to the extent that there will be no need for you as an engineer and other engineers, and then a robot producing a machine that produces another machine?
Horrible idea. We tried that.
And
Still need people.
Then what happens to, yes, we still need people, but
Yeah.
how many are there going to be at the end of the day? Are we humans designed to work at all?
Yeah.
Or are we only supposed to follow a labor of love?
Yeah.
So that is another discussion we sort of had outside. And so yeah, I just wanted to pose that to you actually.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, I definitely believe people are core to building products. I mean, I was raised under an automotive or an aerospace engineer as my father, and he always raised me to believe that we'll always need people to build something, whether it's by the use of other tools, and in my era now, it's by using automation or technology to help us assist with those things, whether it's a safety implication or to reduce labor costs or to improve quality, whatever it might be, or reduce cycle time. People are the core of this, right? We program the robots, we make them better, we make them faster, we fix them when they break, and I think they'll always will be, and I'm a strong supporter of making sure that we're providing people that training to be able to work on these things. And I don't want to, as much as we all love to be lazy humans at some point, we still need to put our time in the industry and contribute to society in a way. So I think that's a very good point. Tom?
So I think about what Tyler challenged us to think about, and that is the false promise of education if it doesn't meet your need as a human being. And for some people, the point of education has become economically viable first.
Sure.
And then, but I think back to, I went to Stevens Institute of Technology as an undergrad, and I met an ancient alumnus who came up and said, 50 years ago, if you went to Stevens, the first year was all humanities. And you studied the classics. And they said, you sons of, we're going to make you human beings first before we unleash you on the world as engineers. That changed over time, and Stevens still does. It's probably the only engineering school that requires 8 full courses in the humanities, 1 per term in the 4 years. But now we expanded on thinking about continuing education. So there's an idea of this 60-year curriculum. If you come out, and I plan to be working until I'm 80, but if you come out of college at 20, we know that the applied value of the specific thing that you study as an undergraduate, its half-life is probably 5 years. Yeah. And in order to be expert in something else, you've got to go on, and now the litmus test is a graduate degree. Yeah. But if we can't afford a $200,000 event every 10 years in our lifetime. There isn't an economic model to pay off the mortgage on a college degree and an advanced degree every 10 years. It doesn't work out. So we have to think about a 60-year curriculum because we've got 60 years of productive life now with our health care. And think about, I'm with Tyler. If you've got the gumption to jump ship at 14 and start a trailer company, do it. And then when the time comes, you're going to pick up the humanities, and then you're going to pick up the business school, and then you're going to pick up the detailed data analytics and the coding and the no-code programming development necessary if we're paying attention to the tools every 5 years that come up. Mm-hmm. But there has to be an economic path into that. You can't saddle young, capable people with a house mortgage coming out of college at 20 years old.
A lot of grand challenges, for sure. Rob?
All right, well, it's not necessarily a trend that I see, but it's a trend that I want to see. Mm-hmm. Albeit YouTube education, formal education, whatever it is, what I would like to see from the next generation is a multidisciplinary background. Being powerful enough to control the robot mechanically, electrically, and on the manufacturing side as well, I feel that because these technologies are getting so large and complex, we need to change the way that we educate ourselves and have our minds also adapt to fit the technologies and where we see these trends happening and what's going on. Building the human-machine interface for old retrofitted vehicles, it's difficult because you're taking an old, we'll say archaic technology, and you're putting this new technology in it without educating the users or the customers with that. So a lot of the older generation has a little bit of standoff, let's say, to new technologies. It's harder to accept coming from it because we weren't necessarily born into it like we spoke about. So the new generation, I see it already happening, that their minds have changed in the way that they're thinking about education and how to learn these skills and technologies. So if I see it completely capable for us to go onto YouTube and learn exactly what we need to learn to focus our efforts and excel in an industry that you can decide you want to be in. So I commend you for your efforts, by the way, and I hope more people do the same.
Yeah. Tyler, finish us off.
First of all, I think that's a great point. But I believe that one of the things that we all need to understand is in order for us to be able to learn from those YouTube videos need to be created by somebody, right? So maybe Tesla, maybe yourself, can provide those videos. And then maybe at the end of the video, hey, if you think you're going to be good at this, call us, right? And so there's many ways to open this door of communication. How can we connect with these newer, potential workers, newer potential thinkers? And I want to share with you an experience that I had. My business is heavy into the marketing and online presence side as well. And I was having a conversation with a marketing professor, and this marketing professor happens to be the CEO of a marketing company as well. And every single year, he makes their students take the Google AdWords test to be approved or certified, accredited, right? And he says, I make it my goal to take this test myself every single semester, right? And never once has he made 100 on it. And if you think about that, that's how fast technology is changing. And like you said, 4 years into college, $200,000 in debt. Google AdWords is changing every semester. That's what, every 3-4 months, right? How much innovation have we seen in the past 12 years alone, right? In my own lifetime. It is imperative that we need to develop education as fast as innovation is happening. And I think the people providing the education, the people cultivating that innovation needs to be the one in charge and involved in the educational aspects as well, right? You come out with a new EV application, you come out with a new automation technology, let's make a quick YouTube video about it and show these young kids how we work it. See if these young kids maybe know how to innovate even more on top of that. See if they're interested in coming to work for us or with us. I think that's an angle that we may have to look at, right? These kids don't really want to go to college. These kids don't want to spend a few $100,000s on education that they know they can't apply to these things that they're passionate about. So why not provide and introduce those educational aspects ourselves?
Yeah. We got obviously lots of gaps in Tom.
Just one quick measure of this. The top 10 jobs on Monster, Indeed, and so forth, the titles of the jobs that are the top 10 did not exist 5 to 8 years ago. They're brand new jobs that are the top jobs out there. We didn't even know what those jobs were. So there's got the core education has to be how to think, how to learn, how to be a great human being, but you can't charge $200,000 for that. You've got to have the economic viability, the skill sets to be economically viable and learn into a changing environment.
No, it's good. It's a really good point, and we see that at OEs too. Is we just have all of a sudden found a need for people that we don't even know what that job is. We got to write our own jobs for it, right? And we see people that go to college or learn these skills, and we can't quantify what that is. So we have to ask ourselves in normal business terms, like, well, what is the value add to our business because of what you're offering? And so I think that's a good point. And to Tyler, to build off your point, I think that's a good motivation for OEs and other, think tanks and things like that, where we're able to, how do we frame that so people have something to deliver, so that they're able to go ahead and do something with that? So I think it's a great segue from kind of hitting on technology to where those gaps exist out in the market. So I think we're almost out of time, but I think just hopefully that we've hit on for all of you guys, and maybe if you have that problem you thought of in your current company or where you worked, that you've thought about from what we discussed, there's other ways to solve these problems, not just by buying a piece of technology or buying a system, buying a conveyor system, whatever it might be. There's other ways to think about how to solve the grand challenges of human resources and first to market and just competitive nature of the industry that you guys are all in. So I appreciate you guys' insight and all that, and we'll take some questions if there are any. Back there. Did we steal all the mics?
I agree with everything that y'all have been talking about as it relates to education, but going back to automation and robotics and automotive, I've noticed in the last couple of days that Hyundai made a move to purchase Boston Dynamics. Has anybody got any thoughts on the strategic and tactical benefits and angles of that?
Anybody want to take that? Hyundai's purchase of Boston Dynamics. It's a robotics company that's they're famous for making the dog that like can stand up on itself.
I actually have a relationship with the gentleman who founded that program. One of the top African scientists. He's in Africa now. That's pretty news to me. I'm very excited about it, but I don't know how to feel about it again, because Boston Dynamics is one of the reasons why people sort of fear robots. But it's a beautiful thing that we are now venturing into a world where maybe humans won't have to do very difficult work except the things that they love, things that they want to put love to, so that's my take on that.
Yeah, I think the capabilities of acquiring someone like Boston Dynamics is huge for a company's competitive edge, right? I mean, Boston Dynamics, while they don't make vehicles, a lot of the sensory and feedback systems that they use for their robots is quite amazing.
That's what I was going to touch on. Say it helps them twofold, not only in the automation of their manufacturing line, but the automation of the vehicle platform as well. So really excited to see which avenue they go down, if it's both or one. I think it's only going to help the industry in general by bringing in these other companies to collaborate with. So it might not be supply chain, but it's shared technologies. And I think it's fabulous, and we need to do that.
So I'm not certain, Greg, if you're concerned that it's Hyundai, which is a traditionally Korean firm, buying an ultimately American, back to the revolution, Boston company, if that's the concern, or if it's just a comment on the war for talent in general. And that is, so this was an example of what we were talking about in some other conversation, acqui-hire. You're going through an acquisition to hire the talent necessary to do the robotics that they may have felt that they were behind on. And just go to, in general, 5G wireless is rolling out. In order to recognize the trillions of dollars of economic promise of everybody that's hyping up that technology, the Department of Labor suggests that there's going to be a shortfall of 1.5 to 2 million people steeped in enough in 5G to make that industry work and actually gain the return on the investment. In cybersecurity, before 2030, there's going to be a shortfall of 3 million people that are sufficiently certified in cybersecurity. And this is not people writing algorithms to picobytes worth of security and so on. These are financial, accounting, operational administrators who understand enough about cybersecurity to protect the asset of the company that they work for. So the thing that disturbs me about the Hyundai acquisition of Boston Robotics or Dynamics is all of the services that Boston Dynamics was making available to everybody else that was buying their research as a service is now eclipsed from the market, and it's inside of Hyundai. Now, where is the rest of the market that's going to benefit from what they knew about robotics as a service to others? The population, the economy is going to have to generate a whole new set of engineers that have those services to make them available to competitors to Hyundai. So I'll stop there.
Mitchell's point, maybe it's autonomy and sensory and perception and navigation and learning and intelligence. But anyway, thought it would be
That's a good question.
thought it'd be a loaded question since it involves all
Completely loaded.
It's a very good question.
Good question. Hey, Mitchell, great job leading this discussion and team. I thought you guys did a fantastic job, very stimulating. Chris Adams again from Discount Tire. And I just wanted to try and put into perspective how we're thinking about robotics and automation and the coexistence within a workforce that really has helped make Discount Tire a successful brand. Not only have we made an investment in where we see the market shifting from consumer ownership into fleet, so we want to grow and gain and win more fleet business. And as you think about that and total cost of ownership being a big part of fleet within how fleet managers think, a big dimension in that is time and safety. And so we've made an investment recently in robotics. And the way I think about it, we can almost have a store in a box and shift those robotics and go in-house with certain companies, so it doesn't necessarily disrupt our own kind of employee flow and network. And the business is called RoboTire, so early kind of days. And Mitchell, you might have heard of them, in being out in Northern California. And then I also think about the coexistence back within our stores. It's our strategy to be the most inviting, easy, and safe tire retailer in the world. And so safety being a huge dimension as well, as you think about, total cost of ownership and less downtime, and just, but not only safety of our customers, safety of our employees. But will this, as we streamline and we think about, certainly in fleets, less, derivatives of tires, and even some things that we could do specific to different manufacturer needs and perhaps go on site. But in working in tandem with our employees, will this allow them as well to get into other services that we traditionally have not done? So now we're into wiper blades. As we think about evolving into servicing everything EV, and robotics freeing up some time, can now that workforce be used to service brakes as needed or install cabin air filters? And so I just wanted to just try and give an example of how we're thinking about it, and if robotics can be used successfully on the OEM side from a production standpoint, why not in the aftermarket service world, safely and certainly from a productive standpoint. And I love how the term cultivate was used. That is so key in terms of, as you think about taking care of your people and your customers, you have to have a culture that cultivates its talent and is there to support them and play a huge part of education. But I thought that you guys did a phenomenal job and really stimulated a lot of great thought.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example, right? Is that it may seem like such a very esoteric thing that it's a buzzword, like what does that mean? But being able to just put in some level of automation into your business has now allowed you to branch out into other markets or other portions of the industry that you're competing in. And that's what ultimately drives success for you in business development, right? Because now you've created more opportunities where you can reallocate resources to maybe focusing on more value adds, or maybe you get better margins on doing wiper blades instead of changing tires. These things wouldn't exist if you just had more people, right? Maybe it would take longer to do those things, but that's kind of what we were trying to get at, is being able to think about, is there other ways that I can generate more opportunities without thinking, what do I already have? Is there something else I can do to streamline some portion of my business and allocate that resource and then find that new opportunity? So I think that's a good opportunity.
Yeah, I wanted to spotlight one thing and say thank you to your organization. Not everybody knows, but really, I actually helped on a project of Discount Tires. What happened was they presented a college class a problem that they had, and they wanted to automate the lifting of tires onto the cars. That was to mitigate millions of dollars in claims, injury claims for the company itself. So we didn't touch on that aspect at all, but automation also, it helps mitigate injury in the workplace as well. And I think that was super impactful. And when I heard the name again, I was like, oh my gosh, I remember this project. And it was fabulous that the direction of a company was to bring in a technology that was not previously there to keep their employees safe. It also helps, financially in the long run, but you touched on the factor of safety, and I think that was one thing that we didn't talk about, but that's actually very impactful when it comes to automating the assembly lines.
Yeah, just real quick, I think distributors often wait for their OEMs or manufacturers to innovate, and so I commend you for being able to take that step ahead and maybe potentially, I don't know what exactly it is that you're working on, but share that, maybe some that the OEMs could potentially use technology, maybe new technology that you might find. So it's something that I have to do more too, innovate on the distribution and as a trailer parts distributor. But that's awesome. I commend you for that.
Any other questions?
Dan Lopreto from Meter Feeder Technology. Getting to the point you were making about the lack of labor and acqui-hire that's going on, I'm wondering if you think that those sorts of decisions and now this technology that existed before that's now been purchased and isn't available, do you think that will create more consolidation between companies because maybe they have otherwise profitable products but no manpower or boots on the ground, if you will, to be able to fulfill customer needs? Or do you think it'll create more fragmentation where companies outsource maybe their cybersecurity or other needs? And what sort of impact do you think that will have on the overall automotive economy?
Tom, do you want to take that one?
I think the problem of unprepared workforces is that it just delays the promise of the return on the investment till much later. So what happens is that 5G, if you listen to AT&T and Verizon, we've had 5G since 2015, which is just absolutely not true, right? It really just got ratified in 2020, and it's just now that 5G is really there. And to the consumer, we don't notice any difference in our services. The promise of 5G is to come in the next 10 years when all of the Internet of Things and all of the industries start to take it on and are able to do things at the edge of the network that they couldn't before. But for the telecommunications companies to be able to roll it out, they have to be able to define products and pricing structures and train their technicians and so forth in order to roll it out. And here in Las Vegas, I'm having a great time in this fantasy world of Las Vegas, but I'm not here for the vacation. But we can't man the restaurants enough. So what happens in Las Vegas is it's going to take a while for the crowds to come back with the promise of full capacity to provide the services at the level promised by the hype of Las Vegas. Same thing with 5G. Same thing with autonomous vehicles. And Jesse's given us the hook here, so I'm going to stop.
That's a good analogy, thank you.
All right. They're kicking us off. All right. Okay, well, thank you guys for your time, and thank you guys again to the panel. If you guys wouldn't mind giving them a round of applause for joining me up here on the stage. Thanks again for your guys' time.
Thanks for being here with us.